Hey guys, what's going on? Sorry if I was just sitting there looking silly for a second. What's going on? It's Ask Truth Apologetics. Hope everybody is doing well today. Hi, just JP. Good to see you, brother. I assume you were a brother. Sometimes I misspeak. So good to see you. Today is going to be just kind of an open forum, open discussion. Just talking about some recent events, some political stuff, talking about the Israel Palestine kind of debate and what's been going on with the conflict. I am a Westerner. I live here in the United States. I have never once traveled to Israel or Palestine or really even out of the United States. The information that I get is what I'm willing to Google, what I see on YouTube, obviously, what the main media sources are telling us. I have a couple of friends who grew up in the area of Israel and Palestine. Some of them are of kind of the Arab descent, so they are going to be much more on the pro-Palestine position. Others are more of the Jewish descent, and they're of course going to be more of the pro-Israel position. As an American, typically, our government typically sides with Israel, right? So, keeping in mind kind of my blind spots, keeping in mind, the propaganda that is being fed, I think, on both sides. I just want to kind of just bring up a topic of conversation. I'm going to plug into the chat here my Skype. So if somebody does want to end up Skyping in having a conversation with me, I will not show your face unless you ask me to, then I will show your face. So what I'm going to do is we're just going to kind of go into the topic, let you guys have conversations. I'll pull up, if you say something in the chat, I'll pull it up onto the screen so we can talk about it. If you want to call in, like I said, just go ahead and bring it up. All right. So just wanted to put that out there. The first thing one of the main things that I've been thinking about is what I hear from a lot of Palestinians or people who are pro-Palestine, is they say that the occupation of Israel, and they make sure to call it an occupation of Israel, is essentially an illegal occupation of the land. They feel like it isn't their land. They don't deserve it. It's the Palestinian land, etc., etc. Right? They talk a lot about how unfair Israel is to the Palestinians, how unfair it is to the Arab world to have the Jewish state that is living in there. They talk a whole lot about persecution, about annexation, all of those types of things, right? So I'm not an expert in this at all. Hey, what's up? Why Hoffs and Warsh are not the same? It's Daif, brother. Here, if you do want to call in, feel free. I put the link here in the chat. Thank you, VB. Trying to keep it smooth on the sides here in terms of the haircut stuff. Um, so one of the things that I look at and think about is, what's fair, what's not fair. So just kind of more of a philosophical question is, how do nations come into existence, right? So pretty much every single nation on the earth that I'm aware of has been fought over, has been conquered time and time again by different groups, different political parties, different ideologies, different people of different religions have conquered a lot of different lands. Is it fair? Are they always treating everybody fairly in order to accomplish their goal and their task? I would say no. I mean, most of the time it's a violent takeover, it's war, it's bloodshed, it's loss of life. And as a Christian, what I do want to say first and foremost is, we believe that all mankind is created in the image of God. So whether you're Palestinian, Saudi Arabian, Chinese, Native American, whatever it is, whatever your cultural background is, whatever your gender is, even what your sexual orientation is, you are created um, in the image of God, right? And we are taught as Christians to not only love our friends, not only love our neighbors, but to also love our enemies, and that every single human being, born or unborn, hi Chloe, that's why I'm talking to you, um, is made in the image of God, and we have that dignity inherent in who each and every single person is. So at no point in time do I want us, myself included, um, but sorry, Wyhoffsenwarsh is not the same. I need to come up with a quicker name for you, buddy. No problem. If you do want to call in, just feel free to call in. Same thing to anybody. If you do want to call in, my Skype, I keep putting my link in here. I'll just keep doing it temporarily. If you want to call in and join up, you want to add something to the conversation, bring up an objection, bring up a point I've not covered yet, feel free to call, or you can just write it into the comments section here, and I can take your call or put your question up here. I'm trying to think where I was. So I was just talking about human right, human dignity. We're supposed to love our enemies. I want to make sure that we keep this as respectful as possible. So no matter what position you hold, pro Israel, pro Palestine, pro whatever. All right, I got this. What's up, buddy? I got you. This is the correct thing. I will accept your message. So if you want to call, feel free to call in, buddy. And so one thing that I do want to go into, one thing that I want to tap into, is make sure that we keep this respectful. We want to keep this as objective as possible. If we have an opinion, let's share the opinion, but let's not get too aggressive about stuff. That's all I have to say about that. So what I was saying earlier was pretty much every nation has been taken over by some sort of violent war, violent bloodshed. There's winners and there's losers. Like it or not every country gets a participation trophy, right? You win or you lose. That's pretty much how it goes. And if you're the loser of that particular fight or that particular war, you are then at the mercy of the people who conquered you. That's plain and simple how it goes. If you want to create an uprising and you want to retake over that land, then you have the ability to do that if that's something that you want to do. Yeah, dude, I have no problem bringing you on here in a minute. Sorry, Hafs, I don't have StreamYard. I use Ecamm Live. So and probably before anybody calls in, let me get through my little spiel here, and then you guys can kind of bring in your questions. So having said that, let's think about the history of the land of Palestine as it pertains to the Bible, right? So originally in the biblical form, Palestine was known as the land of Canaan, right? It was occupied by Egypt at the time. And it basically remained so until Moses came in and drove out, actually, it was Joshua who drove out the inhabitants of the land of Canaan, and Israel took over. Okay. A lot of people would say that wasn't fair to the inhabitants of Canaan, but Israel was the winner in terms of that war, so they took over that land. As we go throughout the Bible, we realize that the Jewish homeland, Israel, is eventually conquered by Babylon. It's conquered by Persia. It's conquered by the Assyrians, right? And then eventually, in between those things, Israel wins it back or is given the land back in some form or fashion. It is then mostly conquered by the Greeks, Alexander the Great, and then is eventually fully conquered by the Romans, right? After the Romans conquered it, right, it was kind of taken over by the Byzantine Empire. After the Byzantine Empire ended, the Arabs, right, the Muslims, the Islamic State, ends up conquering that land, taking it over themselves. Eventually, it turns into the Ottoman Empire, right? The Ottoman Empire lasts for a significant period of time, enters into World War I, loses the war, and then the UK overtakes that particular land, kind of colonizes it, runs it, and then they give it to Israel after World War II. Okay, so the reason why I'm bringing this up is I just want you guys to understand this is how the land works. This is how war and all that kind of stuff works. So it is the land, and right now it has been given to Israel, and Israel didn't just receive it and then has just been sitting pretty and everybody else is defending her, though that's absolutely not true. They went to war immediately when they became a state. They won that war, right? So they won the right to defend themselves. They won the battles and things that when they were being attacked by other nations. Also, at the same time, they started out with not that much land. Palestine had its own separate state, and it was kind of 50-50 ish, just in terms of the geography. In 1967, and this is kind of where I really want to start out on this. In 1967, Israel goes to war with Egypt, Jordan, Palestine. I think Lebanon was involved in it. And if I'm missing anything, go ahead and remind me, guys. So they go to war. It's called the 6 Days War. Okay. During the 6 Days War, and I'm going to go ahead and share this. Let me click on that. During the 6 Days War, as you guys can see here on the screen, let me move that down maybe a little bit or zoom out, actually. Okay, so during the 6 Days War, Israel won the West Bank, right? So they were attacked by Jordan on the West Bank. They ended up winning this whole land here. They even won here up here at the Golan Heights, and they defeated Egypt and won the entire Sinai Peninsula. So one thing I want us to consider when we're talking about this is Israel had the rights because of their defeating all of their enemies in an all-out war. And by the way, if you look at the statistics, Israel was greatly, greatly, greatly outnumbered, not only by troops, but by planes and tanks and all of the other things that are meant to win wars. They were outnumbered. They won fair and square. And so a lot of people think that the Jewish nation has this ideology that they want to control each and every corner and aspect of the land of Israel. That includes getting rid of the Palestinians, getting rid of the Gaza Strip, etc., right? But when they had everything that a lot of these people who think are I would call them conspiracy theorists, right? They think that Israel wants to take it over. So my question is, when they had control of the land, what would you expect them to do if their main goal was to have all the land? They already had it. Well, then you would just assume that they would keep the land and run it under one nation as Israel, right? And Palestine would be gone, just in terms of a nation. But that's not how it went. Okay, there were treaties involved in this, and so Israel and Palestine, the leaders got together and they decided, okay, these are going to be our defined territories. These are going to be our defined X, Y, and Z. So that's kind of where we're at now. Okay, so there's going to be a lot of finger pointing and blaming and things like that. One of the things, okay, thank you, Hofs, why Hofs and Wars are not the same. Syria was also involved in this as well, right? So we've got a whole bunch of nations fighting against one nation. Is Israel mistreating people? Is there a human rights issue going on? I think you can make a argument that there probably are some human rights issues going on. Now, having said that, right, um, you know, uh, first of all, the majority of the Israeli citizens are actually non-religious, so it's not exactly a religious thing, at least at this point. I would say in Palestine, the vast majority of people are religious, right? The vast majority of people living in Palestine are Muslims, and a very, very few of them are Jewish and Christian. Um, so just throwing all that out there. So are they cutting off power and all that kind of stuff? Are they preventing people from coming in and worshiping, like at the Al Aqsa Mosque? Are they stopping these kinds of things, shooting rubber bullets? I don't know, right? I wasn't there. I don't know exactly what goes on. But at the same time, Israel has an intelligence quarter, right? They have people who are collecting intelligence and determining whether or not there is some sort of threat, whether it be of terrorism or invasion or whatever it is. So these are things that I don't know. These are things that I don't think any of us know. Um, so it's hard to say why they would be so concerned about if someone's coming in or not, if they're going to be persecuting Muslims for worshiping at Alaska, whatever it is. I don't want to necessarily get into that. I don't have enough information to really even have a stance on that particular position. The other thing that I want to point out is I really want to get us to the actual events that have been going on. Okay. So as the timeline goes, the Israeli police, they kicked out and shot rubber bullets and tear gas and all this kind of stuff at people who were trying to worship at the Alaska Mosque and the Dome of the Rock and all those types of things. And so that stimulated a lot of rockets being launched from the Gaza Strip into Israel. There was about, I think it was like, last I read, it was 4,075 rockets launched from Gaza to into or towards Israel. Right now, Israel has a air defense mechanism that blocks the rockets. Right, they heat detect or whatever they do. It shoots up in the air and it explodes the rockets in the air so that they do not actually make contact with anyone on the ground. So far as I know, about 12 people in Israel have died. And I can't recall exactly how many people in the Gaza Strip died, right? I think it was a lot more than that, maybe 200 to 300. Um, and so, and one thing I do want to say, VB, is I think there's actually a difference between Palestine in terms of like West Bank and the Gaza Strip. I think there's a major difference, right? One is kind of run by Hamas and the other one is not. But again, I'm not 100% sure of this. So, you know, President Biden says that, Israel has the right to defend itself. I think everybody understands that any nation has the right to defend itself. Now, what's tragic, and this is where I want to be careful. What's very tragic is that Israel did bomb into Gaza, into the Gaza Strip, which is like 2 million people in like 25 square mile radius. It's a lot of people there, and they're bombing these buildings where oftentimes there are families that are living there, like actual just civilian families who are caught in between this huge mess. And it's really, really sad to see that these people are dying. However, if it's true, what I read, what I've seen, is a lot of the rockets that are being launched from Gaza towards Israel are being launched from residential neighborhoods. So, as a protective device, Israel is going to have to take care of those places that are launching rockets. So, one thing I do want to ask, I want to ask people who are saying that only Israel is at fault here. I don't think only Israel is at fault. I can pretty emphatically say that it's not only one side that's at fault here. Um, and they complain, and I don't want to take away from how important each individual person's life is. And so it's a tragedy that anyone died on any side. However, having said that, what was the intended target behind the rockets, the 4,075 rockets that were shot from Gaza towards Israel? Were they pointed exclusively at military bases, at government buildings, or were they just willy-nilly shot in whatever direction with the hopes that it would kill as many Israeli citizens as possible? Well, I'm going to go with the second choice. I think they were shooting as many Israeli citizens as they possibly could. Just luckily, they weren't able to do it because of the Iron Dome. So we need to take into consideration not necessarily the actual death count, but the intended death count. Okay. And I also want to take into consideration, especially Hamas, especially in the Gaza Strip, their on their perspective of who the Jews are and what they ought to do with them. I mean, there's even an authentic Sahih Hadith that says that the rocks and the trees will cry out to the Muslims and say, "Behind me is a Jew. Come over here and kill him." Right? So they're not when they're just shooting it into Israel, they're assuming that pretty much most of the people there are Jewish people, and their intent, based on Sahih Hadith, says that they ought to be killed, right? And so that is a very concerning thing in terms of an ideology that I'm concerned with. I'm trying to think if there's too much else that I would like to say. There's not a whole lot else that I want to say. I'm going to scroll back up here and see if I've gotten any good questions or anything that someone has said. Let me post my Skype link if anybody wants to follow that. Give me a call if you want to, or just post a question here in the link. Let's see. All right. So here's a couple of things from Fabian. Good to see you, brother. It's been a minute. So it says Abraham sent Hagar and Ishmael away from his son Isaac and his property, right? So a lot of people are going to think that this is a strictly religious war, a strictly religious thing. Now, I'm not taking sides on this particular thing, but what I will say is I believe the words of the Bible. I believe that it's shown over and over again to be true in terms of prophecy that we can see. And so, therefore, I believe that future prophecy will be true. And we know that in the end of days, that Israel is going to be a state. And we know at the end of the days that the third temple, right, is going to be rebuilt. And we know that the abomination of desolation is going to stand in that, right? So the Antichrist is going to have 3 years or 3.5 years of peace, right? And then after he makes his proclamation in the temple, then all hell literally is going to break loose. So it's pretty easy to say, as a Christian reading the Bible, believing the prophecies about the end times, that we're going to reach a point in time where this happens, right? It's going to get worse, right? So it's going to get really, really bad. That's just how it is. I don't want it to happen, right? But I know that the Word of God says it's going to happen. So therefore, I believe it's going to happen. And then we're going to have the Antichrist take power, create world peace, right? And then once that happens, after 3.5 years, then all hell is going to break loose. XYZ says the Quran says Israel belongs to the Jews. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure in where in the Quran XYZ. Sorry, I don't know that passage. Somebody wants to share that with me, I'll be happy to read it, or if you want to post part of it, I'd be happy to hear it. All right, what do Muslims know is calling me? I'll just answer because I don't think he ever shows his face. All right, let's get him in here. Oh. Let me try to call him back. Sorry, he was calling me. All right, we'll see what he has to say. Make sure you mute the YouTube on your side. What's up, brother? How are you?
I'm great. God bless, bro. How have you been
Yeah,
doing?
God bless you as well. Thank you. I'm doing very well. What would you like to say, sir?
Finally, we get the chance to speak, or
Right?
actually to meet, or however you want to put it.
Mhm.
Okay. Quick information. First of all, first and foremost, I'm a Christian. Christ is my Lord and Savior. Palestine, Israel, USA, Canada, Egypt, Timbuktu, it's irrelevant to me.
Mhm.
As a name, it's irrelevant to me. The land itself, if anything, it's a Christian land. That's the birthplace of our Lord and Savior. Israel of today is not the biblical Israel. Okay. If you go back in the Bible, the land of Philistine is mentioned in the Bible. The Philistines are mentioned in the Bible.
Mhm.
Who are the Philistines? The Philistines are not Muslims. They have nothing to do with Islam. The same exact way like the rest of the majority of the Middle Eastern countries like Iraq, Egypt, Morocco, Tunisia, Syria, all those, they were never Muslim lands. Islam invades, assume your identity, assume your nationality, and start calling themselves accordingly. The war in that particular part of the world, it has nothing to do with politics. It's all based upon a religious war. Israel, as it stands today, is not a Jewish state as they present it. It's a Zionist state. Zionism is not a religious movement. Zionism is a political movement. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, Zionism is anti-Christianity. A Zionist is a Jew. Not every Jew is a Zionist.
Okay.
Jews claim that the land belongs to them. Muslims claim that the land belongs to them.
Mm-hmm.
Who is losing in all this? Us, the Christians.
Right. Right. Caught in the middle.
People
Right.
are looking at things from a political side and people are killing people. Okay, I'm not for Hamas. Hamas is basically no different than Daesh or Al Qaeda or any Islamic movement. The bottom line is we as Christians in that part of the world, we are the one who's lost.
Mm-hmm.
Many in the West, they support the state of Israel without understanding that supporting the Israeli state, that means is destruction for the church and the breaking of the cross.
Okay. So
So,
that's good information. Thank you for your perspective, brother. So what would I'm always just curious as to what do you think, or if there is even a possible solution for a peaceful resolution or solution for the conflict?
a possible solution is very simple. If they want to oblige by two-state solution,
Mm-hmm.
it has to be based upon 67. The West Bank is under the Palestinian government, or Palestinian government, I should say, because I don't recognize this Palestinian BS baloney as Muslims.
Mm-hmm.
Before 67 or the 48 as the Israel state. With given the choice of the people who are living in those two parts, because the West Bank as it is, even though it's supposed to be under the Palestinian Authority, you
Mm-hmm.
have settlements in the middle of those cities and villages, but yet they're under the state of Israel.
Right.
It's like imagine yourself living in, let's say, I don't know which state you live in, but let's say, for example, Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
You're living in the Wayne County. You live in the city of Westland. But to go from Westland to Norville, which is in the same county, the same country, let's say, you have to go through four different Jewish settlements that are under different country. So they should give the Jews who live on that part the choice. It's either you want to stay there, you're going to be fully responsibility of the Palestinian Authority,
Mm-hmm.
and we have no responsibility over you. And vice versa, apply on the Arabs who live in the 48 borders.
Okay.
But it's like we have something called the nail of Juha. I sell you a house, but I still own a nail in there. And every once in a while, I'm going to check on that nail. So it's either you have the whole thing under this or that. Number two, the right of return. That means any Palestinian has the right to come back and live freely without restrictions, without uh, uh, obstacles, without conditions.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people who are from there that live there, just because they left, they can't go back. But yet, God knows with this person where he comes from, calling himself a Jew, and all of a sudden he has a property.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the way it is.
Okay. So there's
So,
definitely some interesting kind of human rights issues. Is that basically what you're saying? Just in terms of kind of almost bullying, Israel seems to be kind of bullying their way into in the middle of like the West Bank.
okay, to a point, yes.
Okay.
The thing is this: Israel in general does not care whether you are an Arab, you are an American, you are Chinese, or whoever you are. They
Okay.
do what they want to do, regardless to what anybody tells them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'll give you an example. I mean, for those so-called wannabe, I call them invented Christians of the West, that say, well, Israel give Christians rights. Can anybody explain to me why Armenian priests were attacked on Sunday going to church in the Armenian quarter by Jews? Nobody talks about these.
Right.
And when you bring them up, oh, those are minority.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Christians are oppressed by both in that area, by Jews and Muslims. But yet, Muslims have more rights. Even though they have enemies between Muslims and Jews, they have more rights than Christians.
Mm. So
The
basically,
popularity of Muslims are expanding, meanwhile, the popularity of Christians are decreasing. Why?
what do you think?
Why? Because, in plain simple English, I live there, I come from there, and point blank, I don't have nothing against Jews. My best close friends were Jews
Mm-hmm.
in the military. I mean, I don't hide it.
Yeah.
The thing is that Jews, they tell you, Muslims are our cousins. You guys are outsiders. So even
Okay.
though they fight, but they still look at themselves as family.
Hmm.
Islam, the majority of Islam comes from Judaism. The filth of the Quran comes from the filth of the Talmud. They share many things in common. A Jew would have the right, if there's a church and there's a mosque, and a Jew needs to pray, a Jew can, with no problems, pray in a mosque.
Right.
But a Jew is not allowed to pray in a church. Their food, they can eat from each other's food, but they don't eat from a Christian food.
Mm-hmm.
There is a saying that goes, eat with a Muslim, sleep with a Christian, because they trust Christians, because with all due respect to Christians, we are too passive. They trust us, and they know we're not going to do nothing. We can get slapped left, right, and center, and at the end of the day, we stand up, oh, God bless you, God bless you. When in reality, that's not what Christ said. We have the right to defend our faith. Okay? So Christians and Jews, Jews and Muslims, even though they fight, but yet they are one.
It's
So
interesting.
that's
Yeah.
why we are the one who's lost. And everybody is concentrating on Israel and Palestinians. Well, with all due respect, the Palestinians that they call themselves Hamas, these have nothing to do with Palestinians. Palestinians are not Muslims. Palestinians are not Arabs. The Philistines are Greeks. Just because a bunch of gangsters came over and took the identity, they should not be identified as Palestinians. Because half of me is Greek.
Yeah.
And they say, well, the Philistines are extinct. Well, in that case, how come there are 10,000 million Greek families that live in that land from God knows how long? One of the families, the last name is Capitaios, Ninos. Those are Christian Greek names. Where did they come from if they extinct? I still have family in Greece.
Hmm.
So you can't come and say, well, this is what it is.
Right. And that's why, that's why I wanted to open up the floor here to hear from other people's perspectives. The fact that so you live basically in the West Bank area in Palestine?
Well, I lived in the West Bank. Right now I live in the US. So
Okay. Yeah, so you were there for how many years? If you don't mind me asking, I don't want to take
that's no
away.
problem. I came here back in 1980.
Okay.
I left and went back in 85. I came back in 1990. I've been there once in 1999. And after I saw the garbage of this so called Palestinian Authority,
Yeah.
it's not worth it to go back.
Right, right. So would you even say that Palestine has a functioning government at this point?
Uh, nope. The so called government only works for themselves.
Yeah.
And the proof of that is Arafat, the one who became billionaire by him when he was a so called president.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
where all
So
that money
it's
went, even this guy, where all the money goes.
so
We know that there are billions of money are going to support, the majority of it stays among the Muslims.
right. So, do you think that the Palestinians are suffering as a direct result of Israel's occupation there, or do you think they're suffering because of their corrupt government?
On both.
Both. What would you
Both.
say? And maybe you don't know, but what would you say is the number one cause of their current suffering?
To point it at one side, I can't do that because I don't know. All I know is that both sides, and generally speaking, I mean not Israel and Palestine, generally speaking, when there is governments involved, we the people are nothing but peons.
Yeah.
You end up believing what you want to believe or what you are brainwashed to believe. And sadly to say, most of the West, they grow up on politics like when they're either mid 20s or late 30s. Anybody coming from the Middle East, we are born in it. So literally, if I hear on the news they say no, it means yes. And if they say yes, it means no. And if you don't hear nothing, you come up with your own assumption because we're nothing but a toy between governments.
Right. Um, would you say that same problem exists in Israel, or is it just more of the Palestinian government? And I'm not trying to pin you into a corner, so if you're not comfortable answering the question, just let me know. I'll keep going.
I'm comfortable with answer anything I can answer to.
Yeah.
Again, generally speaking, any government in the world works for themselves first.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, some governments they give you 80% and they keep 20. Some government they take 80 and they give you 20. But for the most part, governments work to protect themselves.
Right.
That's why politics to me, in other words, you have to be a liar to be a politician. And I can't play that game. Whatever I think, I say. Whatever on my mind comes out. I don't even think of what I say. I'm a straight shooter.
Right.
So it's, I mean, I'm sure in Israel itself, they have the same exact thing, but they get more benefits than what the Palestinian government is giving to the Palestinians. And so, I mean, all that money they can afford giving free, we call it health. They don't. They can afford to do certain things. Meanwhile, in Israel, they do it.
Right. Hmm.
So again, for the most part, governments work for their own interests. That's why, to me, all this thing it's irrelevant to me. I speak as a Christian. That
Mm-hmm.
land is a Christian land. We should have the first authority in there because and Israel is not a secular state. In order for it to be secular, you don't go apply for citizenship and they tell you, well, you have to testify that Israel is a Jewish state.
Yeah.
I mean, you become a citizen of the U.S. They don't tell you the U.S. is an American Christian country.
Right. Right.
But in order for you to become an Israeli citizen, one of the conditions you have to accept the state as a Jewish state.
Mm-hmm.
That's not being secular.
No, it's not.
You
And what I find interesting, I was reading, I think it was a Gallup poll from 2015, and it said that like was it 70%? I quoted it earlier, but almost like 70% of all people living in Israel are they identify themselves as either atheist or non-religious. So to even say that it's a Jewish state is interesting. So do you think they mean religiously Jewish or just ethnically Jewish?
okay? Which to me, when somebody says I'm a Jew but I'm an atheist, with all love to the Jews, I think that's an oxymoronic statement. The reason is very simple. Let's go back, trace. First of all, the term Jew. Now, if a Jew wants to believe in whatever he wants to do to believe in, that's fine. I have no issues with that. My issue is when they brainwash you and you start defending them on something that is not true. The term Jew that never existed. If you go back to their Hebrew books, there is no word called Jew. If you go to Greeks, there is no word called Jew. If you go to Arabic, there is no word called Jew. The term is Yehudi, Yehudim,
Hmm.
which refers to Yehuda. So if you are from the tribe of Yehuda, or in English, Judah, then you are called Yehudim. If you lived in the area, the kingdom of Yehuda, you are called Yehudim.
Hmm.
Okay? If
Yeah.
you trace back their ethnic background or their heritage, goes back to Abraham. What
Right.
was Abraham?
Persian, right?
No, sir. Abraham was Iraqi. He was
Oh,
Chaldean.
Iraqi.
He
Sorry,
was
yeah, my bad.
Ashurian.
Yep.
Okay, so that's his ethnic background. Let's, for argument's sake, your ethnic background is German. You and your
Hmm.
wife are German. You move to the U.S. Your children are born in the U.S.
Right.
They are Americans. Does
Correct.
that change their ethnicity?
Yep.
It changes their nationality, but it never changes their bloodline. The bloodline does not change.
Mm. Well, that makes
So,
sense, and I had actually thought about that. I was having a conversation with a Muslim on my channel, basically yesterday, and that was kind of the same example I gave. It was like, look, like I'm I have like Mediterranean European blood in me. That doesn't mean that I identify myself as that. I'm an American. I was born an American, raised an American. American culture is just what I've been immersed in. If we're talking just in terms of ethnicity, of course, first thing I identify as is a Christian. But my point is, um, that's I think you're spot on, to be honest with you. So, are
see,
your best
your
friend Yahya
nationality is American, but you cannot deny your ethnic background.
right?
And
And
ethnicity goes back to the father, not the mother.
right, but I have no control over that, right? It's not something that I chose. I didn't choose to be born by my parents, right? But I did get to choose my religion or the ideology or political whatever thing I'm standing on. That's a choice that I have. So I've always found it interesting why people even give so much credence to their actual heritage, because that's not a choice that they have, right? If that's something that's influenced their culture and all that kind of stuff, that's important. But yeah, I don't know why people think it's so important that they're it's where you're born, right? It's where you're raised, it's what you believe. That's what's most important.
Well,
um
yes, but for a Jew to say, I'm ethnically Jew, how can you be ethnically Jew?
right, it doesn't even necessarily, so what you're saying is it doesn't necessarily even have any meaning, right? Like you're Middle Eastern, okay, you're Iraqi, okay, like what does it actually mean? um so that makes sense.
Okay, Iraqi, or actually, if to say Iraqi, that means you're Kardanian, you're Ashurian, you come from that part of the
Hmm.
world. That's your ethnic background. But
Right.
to come and say ethnically Jew, how 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 can you say bloodline is Jew?
I don't know. Do
So that's
ancestry.com
what
or
the Jews believe in,
23andMe
which
and
is
figure
fine
that
by
out.
me. I don't have no issues with that, but I'm not gonna go support that and preach on it and defend it without even understanding what they say by it. I'm not a Jew to be saying, for example, oh, for example, which is going to come to the odd on this one, like they say Jesus is a Jew. Okay, can you explain how he's a Jew? Well, his mother is a Jew, but you're a Christian.
Hmm.
Do you believe that your background comes from your mother? No, from my father. So why would you consider Jesus to be a Jew? Well, that's what the Jews believe in. I'm not a Jew. Why should I say what the Jews believe in?
Right. Interesting.
So when somebody says you're ethnically Jew, how can you be ethnically Jew? Are you from the bloodline of Yehuda?
Right. And how can you?
Even if you blood from Yehuda, still Yehuda goes back to Israel. Jacob. Jacob goes back to Abraham. Abraham is not a Jew.
And to be fair, I mean, we all come from Adam and Eve, right? And then passed down through Noah, and so there is obviously a blood relation. I guess it just depends on how far back you want to go in the system of things, right?
True.
So, where was I? Your best friend Yahya here has a lot to say on the topic. Can you believe that?
Yeah, well, he was saying what? Palestine is mentioned in the Quran. Where?
Oh, he said that. I didn't see that. The one thing I pulled
He
up on
said
the,
that
yeah.
earlier in text.
Oh, he did. I must have missed that one. Um, one thing that he also said, he's saying figures and facts, right? So he's saying over 240 deaths, 70 children, 40 women, 17,000 residential unite destroyed, 6 hospitals, 11 small clinics, infrastructure, road, water supply. All that stuff happened in Gaza, sir. So why, is that? does that indicate that there's just that Israel is just this evil, terrible state? What would you say?
When you have 1 square mile that have 3,000 people living in it, and you have 10 people who are firing rockets at you, so what are you supposed to do? Take the rockets and close your eyes about the people there, or you're going to defend yourself and fire back?
Right.
You're going to fire back.
Of course you
So
are.
if you're firing back, you're firing back on a small area with too much population in it to kill a person. Of course, you're going to kill others.
Mm-hmm.
So
Now,
is it sad? Yes, it is sad.
mm-hmm.
But what's sadder is that Hamas themselves, they killed other Muslims because they refused them.
Right.
So human life to a Muslim is zero.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, a Jewish life to a Jew worth a million.
Right. And then here's the thing too that I mentioned this earlier, but I'll say it again. Um, the only reason why there wasn't more deaths in Israel is because of their Iron Dome, right? When you shoot off 4,070 rockets, thank you, Yahya, for correcting me. I think I said 75. So 4,070 rockets toward Israel. How many people, if there wasn't an Iron Dome, how many people do you think would have died from that?
Now, the Iron Domes, I don't know of how effective those are, but again, it's
It was
commercial.
it
I mean,
was
Israel
very
tell you
effective
this.
since only a couple of the bombs landed.
I doubt the couple of bombs. I mean, see, this is what the news tell you. The
Yeah.
reality, I don't believe what the news says.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so what do you think actually happened?
I'm being honest about it. I
Yeah.
don't believe what the news say, especially if it comes from Israel's side or it comes from Hamas side, because Hamas will tell you we killed 1,000. Israel, to cover up, will tell you no, it didn't hit nobody.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
So
just the reported numbers from like BBC and all those types of news stations, say that it's 12 people that were killed in Israel, and then I don't know if you watch the news or not. I mean, I've seen all the bombs getting shot off from the Gaza Strip, and then you can see the interception missiles being shot out from Israel. So it appears as if they're taking down almost all of the bombs. So I mean, from my perspective, I would say that those numbers are pretty accurate. I would say, but it's interesting that you say otherwise. I mean, what do you think actually happened, or you just have no idea?
I mean, I can't be accurate on this. All I can tell you is that the missiles that Hamas shoots, they're all homemade. I mean, you're not buying missiles from Russia or the U.S. or China.
Well, the story I believe is they were at least funded by Iran. I don't know if Iran provided them for them, but they're at least receiving a lot of funding from them, and they look to be.
Which makes it kind of questionable because Iran is Shia and Hamas are Sunnis.
Yeah, and that's what other people have mentioned as well. So.
But even funded, that's money. But they're all homemade.
Mhm.
So how accurate can they be?
Right, I don't know. I mean, obviously they can't be that incredibly accurate. I'm just going based off of the video footage that I've seen. They were up in the air. They were coming very very quickly and directly towards the camera crew at least, right? Who was in Israel or Tel Aviv or kind of in those different locations. But even still, right? So let's say that none of them were actually going to even make it over the wall or whatever, right? Um, let's just say, what was the intention behind them? That's what I want us to think about, is what did they hope would happen by shooting those missiles into Israel?
Put fear. Putting fear will create pressure on the government.
Yeah. So you don't
If
think they
putting fear
wanted
in
to necessarily
the
kill
people will
people?
start creating pressure on the government to find a solution.
Yeah. So do you think that that they were trying to kill people, or do you think they're just trying to scare them,
I
or
mean,
both? I mean, obviously, it's scary to have missiles launched at you.
it's both ways. I mean, how you can? I mean, I can understand if they're scaring them by making threats, but when you're doing the physical action, you can't scare people without killing them.
Right.
I mean, going between 10 people and start slashing a couple of people. Are you threatening them or you're scaring them? You're
Mm-hmm.
doing both.
Mm-hmm.
So this scaring them by shooting rockets, man, uh, it's kind of, to me, it's stupid.
Yeah.
But on the same token, Israel always put pressure to get more than what they give. Personally, I'd rather be under a Jewish government than under a Islamic government. I mean, if you're gonna give
Right.
me a choice between the two, I'd rather live under a Jewish government.
Right.
And
And
I
yeah.
was living under an Israeli government
Mm-hmm.
at one point.
Yeah.
Okay? We never had the garbage they have today.
Mm.
Even though Hamas, technically, it was created by Israel.
What
I
was it?
mean,
What was
that's a
that last
complete
bit you
different
said? I'm
topic.
sorry, I missed that very last thing you said. What did you say?
I said Hamas technically was created by Israel.
Okay, so I've heard that before too, and it sounds conspiracy theory ish, right? So please, let us. I'm curious to hear what you mean by that.
Okay, okay. The majority, actually, not the majority, I would say 99.9% of what can be labeled as traitors or collaborators with the Israeli government are Muslims.
Okay.
Back in, I would say, I think, like middle 1980s, 86, 87, when the first Intifada started, and they changed the name of the West Bank from the occupied West Bank to, I think, self-governed West Bank.
Mm-hmm.
They changed the name where actually they gave some authority to Palestinians while Israel was still controlling. During that process, Israel invented what is called Rawabit al-Qura. Basically, they're a group of people, all of them are Muslims,
Mm-hmm.
that they run certain things. Anytime you need a government document or you need a paper, the first signature you have to get is from them. They all were uh, they all were armed with Israeli arm. I mean, weapons and everything was supported by Israel.
Okay.
And they were actually the first Muslims who started Hamas from. They're the first groups who started all this because all of them were Muslims. Now, when Israel pulled back and the Palestinians came over, those people split. They don't want to be part of the PLO or the Palestinian Liberation Organization
Mm-hmm.
that consists of three: Fatah, the Democratic Front, and the Popular Front. They don't want to be part of that because two of those were considered to be communist: the
Mm-hmm.
Popular Front and uh, the Democratic Front, the PFLP and DFLP.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Fatah, which is the ruling party at this time, they're considered to be like semi-religious. They're not all into religion. Okay, those were wanted the whole thing to be Islamic, so they pulled out and they formed themselves and they start calling themselves Hamas, which means Harakat Muqawama Islamiyya, Islamic movement. See, when people call the term Hamas, it looks like, wow, it's bad. But
Yeah.
if you understand what the letters mean, Harakat Muqawama Islamiyya, it's an Islamic movement organization,
Okay.
which literally means it's Islamic government.
Yeah.
So that's how it started.
Okay.
And now people will tell you no, but I mean, certain things, it is what it is, but denying it, what would it do? For example, like ISIS. As ISIS was created by the US and Israel. And what was the reason for it is to take the Syrian regime down. I mean, it's not conspiracy. These things are completely obvious. And again, if you are a Muslim and I can use you, okay, to benefit something from you, I will support you. But at the end of the day, they turn against and they start fighting me.
Right. So basically, you're saying that these types of organizations have been created by other governments to do kind of what they don't want to do out in the open, essentially.
Exactly. Israel
Um.
never dirty its hand unless if it comes to it directly.
Okay.
Israel always uses a third party to do its dirty work.
All right. So again, just
Okay,
me
like
as
with
and
Iran,
I
for example, they wanted the US to be involved.
right.
Well, who's closer to Iran? You or the US? Why do you want the US involved?
Mm-hmm.
So they always try to get a third party to get involved. Syria, they don't want to make it directly between them and Syria,
Mm-hmm.
so they invented other group to do their dirty work.
So assuming that's correct. So just FYI for other people, I'm not sure I believe that, but I'm more than willing to hear it out. So no offense to you, brother, but just assuming
No,
that
that's
that
fine. Hey,
but assuming what you say is correct. Um, are the people like in ISIS or Hamas? Do they know that they're? Do they think that they're doing the right thing, or they just, or do they know they're just being paid by like the U.S. or by Israel to do stuff? Like, how genuine are they in their essentially their jihad?
according to them, they're doing what the Quran tells them.
Okay, so do
So
you
they don't
believe
care
that
where
they
they're getting.
fully
They
believe
don't
what they're
care where
doing?
they're getting paid from. They don't care who's supporting them. As at the end of the day, their goal is to accomplish what the Quran tells them.
Okay, but they're kind of being funded by like Israel and other Western nations to a certain extent, so that let's say Syria or Iraq can be eaten alive by the inside out. Is that what you're saying?
For the most part, yes, that's
Okay,
how they start. But once they build up, they turn their back on the ones who actually started them, and they start getting funds from other Islamic areas.
okay. Well, that's interesting. So then, and you're echoing what a lot of my Arab friends actually say as well. They say, "Oh, well, ISIS was created by the Jews or was created by the United States government, and so was Al Qaeda, and blah blah blah." Um, and to me, Romy, I'm kind of with you. To me, it does sound uh very in depth, like the most I kind of run off of Occam's razor. I don't know if you've heard of that before or not, but basically the simplest explanation that explains everything is usually, not always, the correct explanation. So anytime in my head there's a conspiracy theory, that means that like there's layers upon layers of people and organizations and things like that that have to um, that have to be involved and to keep their mouths shut, right? And not spill the beans. And so the more people are involved, the less likely it is for it to actually be a reality. So that's just my opinion.
Well, let's take Al Qaeda, for example.
Mhm.
Before it was Al Qaeda, what was it?
Well, they were fighting. I don't know where you're going with this. So they were fighting the Russians, right?
Okay,
And the United States was funding them in that sense, right? That's pretty open information, correct?
okay.
And then fill in the blanks from there for me. I'm curious to.
So there you go. Who started them? They did not start the actual name, but who supported them and who funded them from the beginning?
Right. The United States position, I believe, I've not actually read this, at least not in a long time. The United States position was the Russians were oppressing the people of Afghanistan, and there was a particular group of people who were resisting them, and the United States, being the Team America. I don't know if you guys have seen that movie or not, the World Police or
Yeah.
whatever, go in and they, fund basically the rebels whom they believed at the time were doing the right thing. Um, and so to me, that is at least explains that. Um,
Okay, but Russia was a communist country.
correct. Yep.
Afghanistan is an Islamic country.
Yeah.
Even though the U.S. is infidels, but they still to the Muslims they are believers. Russians are not believers, so they're gonna come to you for help. They're not gonna go for somebody else.
I see.
So when they came to the U.S. for help, okay, they did not come to the U.S. for help just because Russia is coming over or pressing them because it's a communist country. They're
Hmm.
taking over and they're stripping them from their religion.
I see. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that, buddy. I appreciate everything you've done here. Let me see if we got some other questions that you might want to answer. Now, you said there was one from Yahya way earlier that you said he asked. Do you remember what it was?
Yeah, Yahya mentioned something about that the Quran talks about Palestine, mentions Palestine.
Okay,
And
yeah,
I
go ahead
asked
and
him
talk about
where.
that. Yeah.
The Quran actually says the land is for the sons of Israel,
Yep.
Bani Israel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And Bani Israel, like he mentioned that, are the sons of Jacob. But I don't see Muhammad involved in that. Muhammad is not even from Jacob. So how could it become a Muslim land?
Right. Right. And just for people who might not know who Jacob was in the Bible, Jacob has a different name, right?
Jacob actually his name, Jacob,
Yeah, but then he becomes Israel, correct?
and he
That
becomes
yep.
Israel.
Correct. So Jacob
And
had a
actually, he doesn't become Israel. God gave him the name
gave him the
Israel.
name,
He
correct.
changed his
Yep.
name to Israel.
Yep. And then he has 12 sons, 12 tribes, right? And then basically they go into Egypt, right? Moses delivers them back out. Joshua takes them across the Jordan River, and then they're given the quote unquote promised lands. Correct?
Okay, but the promised land, it was promised with conditions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, one of the conditions to accept God and believe in Him. Do the Jews accepted God?
God came in the flesh to them 2,000 years ago, and many of them have accepted Him, and the vast majority, unfortunately, have rejected Him.
Well, the ones who accepted Him are no longer called Jews.
Right.
They became Christians.
Mm-hmm.
So the followers of Christ are Christians. So the land actually is for the Christians. We are the Jews inwardly.
Yep.
We are the Jews of today. So that land actually is promised to us,
Mm-hmm.
not the Jews of today.
Yep.
Many say, God bless Israel, God bless the Jews. Now, you're a believer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure many in here are believers. Would God bless homosexuality?
No, probably
Would
not.
God bless prostitution?
No.
Would God bless drug addicts?
No, not unless they
Israel
all
is
ask for
number one
repentance.
or number two in the world that promotes the homosexuality, the BLGT, BGTL, whatever that term is.
They added a AI and then I think another letter and a plus sign. I just saw that the other day. So it's up to is it 9 letters or something like that? We're getting pretty close to half the letters in the alphabet. So there you
A, B, C, D.
go. Yep.
Israel is number one or two in promoting prostitution.
Interesting.
Israel, in Tel Aviv, their streets
Mm-hmm.
are openly with no problems. You go drive in there, pick anybody you want. It's legal.
Yeah. No, I'm actually
So how can I say, as a Christian, how can I say God bless Israel, God bless the Jews when this is what they're doing? We love the people, we love the Jews, but which Jews?
mm-hmm.
A person who got, just because he calls himself a Jew, and why are you a Jew? Because my mother is a Jew.
Right.
So what does that supposed to mean?
Right, and like so people like was it John the Baptist, right? I can't remember which gospel he was talking about, but he basically says the you feel like you have eternal life because you're descendants of Abraham, but God can raise up from these rocks descendants from Abraham, right? Children from Abraham. So that's to me that's one of the more powerful Bible passages that talk about how your heritage it can be important, but the most important thing is what you choose to do, right? What God you choose to follow, whether you follow Christ or you follow something else, right? We all know that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and there is no other way to the Father except through
Through
Him.
him.
Right, exactly, and so there's a lot of people who I think haven't been given the gospel. They've not been given the gospel message, and that's of course what we do, and we call people to Christ as much as possible. Um,
Well, what do you call a person who you show him what the gospel says and he tells you, well, I don't care, this is what I believe. I'm a Christian not because of what you're telling me, what the Bible says. I'm a Christian because this is what I believe. What do you call a person like that?
Um, I would call them probably mistaken. I'm nice
I
though.
mean, for years now, I've been fighting a group of people that call themselves Christian Zionists.
Okay, yeah, yeah, I've heard of those. Yep.
Where is Christian Zionism mentioned in the Bible?
I can't.
Zion in the Bible has nothing to do with today's Zionism. Today's Zionism is a political movement.
Right. Well, let me ask you this. So, Isaiah 66, I can't remember exactly what verse, but it talks about can a nation be born in a day, and then it mentions Zion, right?
Zion, which is Jerusalem.
Right.
But what does this have to do with Zionism?
I don't know. I don't know. I was just asking. I was asking you that.
Okay. Zionism, if you look at the history of Zionism, it's nothing based upon, it's a political movement calling for the Jews to have a homeland.
Mm-hmm.
Who are the Jews? Anybody who calls himself a Jew becomes a Jew. So all those people that known and are unknown, they have the right to live there.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, the Christian like you and me, we only can visit.
Right. And it probably depends on what country we're from too, right? So I can't visit if I'm a Christian from Gaza, right? I can't do that. I'm not allowed, right?
True.
What if I'm a Christian from like Saudi Arabia? And these are just genuine questions. I don't know. Is
Christians from Saudi Arabia is going to be hard because on what passport you're going to travel.
mm-hmm.
If you're going to travel on a Saudi passport, your Saudi passport will say Muslim. It's not going to say Christian. Because you know, as much as I know, there are many Christians there that are under the table.
Mm-hmm. Right. No, exactly.
So unless, like brother Al-Fadi,
Mm-hmm.
he's from Saudi Arabia. Okay, but I think he lives in the U.S., so his Saudi nationality got denounced. Now he has an American passport. He
Yep.
can go there under the American passport.
Mm-hmm. Now, actually, this is kind of a little bit of a separate topic, and then I'm going to jump off of here in a little bit. So I hear from a lot of people who just hate the nation of Israel. They say, oh well, our particular country can't travel there, our particular passport is not welcome there, so therefore they're racist and all these kinds of things. I don't think that particularly makes them racist, because one of the questions that I would say is, a, if you're a nation, you're a genuine nation, you have the right to allow anyone into your country that you choose, right? I mean, that's kind of what it means to be a government, so long as you're not being anti-humanitarian. And then the other question I ask is, can I, as an American Christian, can I travel and visit the Kaaba in Mecca? Just like, say I want to be a tourist, I want to go check it out. Am I allowed to do that?
You can. I think the furthest city you can live is Riyadh,
Right. So I can't
because that's
even.
where most foreigners live in. But
Right.
to go to Mecca and Medina, that's forbidden. You can't.
Right. So if I'm an Arab Muslim and I want to travel somewhere into Jerusalem, right? Let's say that I want to go to Israel somewhere and I want to visit this, that, or the other site, and I'm offended that I'm not allowed to go there, and here you're racist, and I'm this big victim of some oppressive government and blah blah blah. I just want to make sure that if you're going to complain about that, I have no problem if you want to complain about that. I really don't. But I do have a problem if you're going to hold double standards, right? Because if I say, well, why can't I, as a Christian, a U.S. Christian, come and visit Mecca? Well, it's a different story, blah blah blah. Why would you want to, right? But that's a double standard, because if the nation of Saudi Arabia wants to create certain laws and guidelines when it comes to who can come in and out of the country and where they can go, I think they have the right to do so. I can disagree with them, I can be hurt by it, but if I'm hurt by one particular thing, I should be hurt by all things that are similar to it. What do you think?
See, the difference between Israel and Saudi Arabia, when Israel prevents you from going,
Mm-hmm.
not because you're a Muslim or you're a Christian,
Yeah.
they don't look at you as a Christian or a Muslim. They look at what country you're coming from. The Middle East, that means that you're a potential terrorist.
Right.
So they to protect themselves, they tell you no, you can't.
Okay. So do you think
Okay.
that's a good idea on their part?
Well, look, put yourself in their place in order for you to protect yourself.
Yeah.
What would you do?
Oh, I would for sure do it as well. I was just curious what.
So there you go. I don't
Yeah.
have no problem with it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they could go a little bit further and do more background and check, but still, you're coming from a Middle Eastern country, and your passport doesn't say. Most of the passports, they don't say whether you're Christian or Muslim,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not going to be able to tell from a name. I can tell from the name if the person is a Muslim or a Christian or have a question mark. Not everybody can tell. Coming from the Middle East, some of the names are kind of hard to tell.
Right.
So to protect myself, I'm going to say, well, I'm sorry, you can't come in. I can't give you a visa.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not because of your religion. It's out of defending myself, protecting myself from any terrorist act.
Right.
When it comes to Saudi Arabia, they don't have nothing to fear as far as terrorists. They don't want other religions to go there because you become najis. You dirtied their holy grounds.
Mm-hmm.
So it has nothing with being protection. It's more religious.
Gotcha. Well, and then why would they fear a Christian entering into their Kaaba anyway? Like, do we have a history of, violence and terrorism in that sense?
It's not that you will dirty it.
I know.
You're,
I understand. I
don't
was just
forget,
saying,
like
like,
you're a dirty Christian. You're a
mm-hmm,
pig,
mm-hmm,
and pig is forbidden.
yep.
So that's what becomes unholy, unclean.
Mm-hmm. I have no human rights. I'm a second-class citizen, right? I'm not even fully human. I have no dignity. And that's one of the biggest issues that I do have actually with the ideology of Islam is that they create this superiority. Their doctrine, their scriptures, all say basically that they are the greatest of people and they're superior. And in fact, they're basically the only humans that exist, and anyone who's not a Muslim is really not actually a human, right? They're pigs and monkeys and whatever else,
Yeah, but
whatever. Yeah,
you have to understand something. You as an American, you go to Saudi Arabia, you are considered a second-class person. A Muslim from Saudi Arabia, from Jordan, or a Muslim from Egypt goes to Saudi Arabia, he's considered like third, fourth class citizen, even though he's a Muslim like them.
why is that?
I have no idea. It's all this. Most of the Gulf area, with the exception of the United Arab Emirates,
Mm-hmm.
which are more modernized these days, the majority of the Gulf area, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, they look at other Muslims outside their area like third or fourth class citizens. Meanwhile, foreigners, they have more respect.
Right.
Now, you can't, as a Christian, you can't go to the religious areas, but they give you respect.
Mm-hmm.
But a Muslim coming from from Jordan, we call it Algeria, or coming from Indonesia, you are like third, fourth class citizen. Why? I don't know. That's their mentality.
Gotcha.
I don't have an answer for that.
No, I think I don't think anybody necessarily has an answer for that. Except for I think the one thing you said about just being unclean, I think that makes sense just in terms of the Kaaba. But why other Arab countries are considered lesser than, let's say, a U.S. person just entering into not their sacred space, but the only thing I can think of is money, influence, and power. I have no idea. Maybe they just assume that Americans are gonna pay more money in tourism to come hang out with them, and perhaps the other Arab people aren't gonna do it. I have no idea.
Yeah, but they don't have tourism there. Saudi Arabia, you don't have tourism. If you want to go there, you can't just go as a tourist. You have to be a contractor for work
Oh, really?
or work related.
Well, I'm gonna go ahead and say Americans do the best work, but that's just
Now, you as an American driving a car, you got an accident with a Jordanian that's driving a car. You get away with it, he might end up being in prison. A Jordanian gets into an accident with a Saudi Arabian, the Jordanian will go to prison even though he's a Muslim. And the fault will be on the foreigner, always.
it's very interesting. Very interesting. Well, I'm gonna jump off of here, man. I appreciate you so much for calling in. Um, so yeah, just go and kind of hang out. I'll pop you off this line, brother. But feel free to call me anytime. Do you want to? I know you have a YouTube channel, so if you want to kind of tell us a little bit about what you do on your YouTube channel, I would appreciate that.
Well, my YouTube channel, basically, I try to get Muslims to have an open discussion about their Islam and their Quran. And unfortunately, other than Mr. Islam Defender Yahya, who you ask him about the Quran, goes everywhere else but the Quran, they're afraid to come.
Mm-hmm.
They rather, comment in comments or send you some kind of nasty comments, but to come to have an actual discussion, they don't do that.
Right.
Personally, I'm not the person of preacher. I don't preach,
Mm-hmm.
and the only reason I don't do it because I honestly have a filthy mouth. I mean, if I get loose, I get loose, and I
Yeah.
don't feel right to mix, poison with honey and try to get presented as honey. That's not me. So basically, my channel is inviting Muslims to have a discussion.
Gotcha. Well, and hopefully, if there's any Muslims that are watching this now or later, feel free to reach out to What Do Muslims Know and have a good conversation with him. I'm gonna pull someone else's name up here on the screen. I don't know what he's saying up here, but I was just on his channel earlier. His channel name is a long channel name, so why Hofstyn Warsher not same. It's Daif, brother.
Just call him Dr. Kufarophobia.
Dr.
Dr. Kufar. That's good
Kufarophobia.
enough.
All right, Dr. Kufarophobia. I just want to give a shout out to his channel as well, guys. He's got some pretty short videos, interesting stuff. He does some similar things, I think, to what you do, sir, and opens up his channel to having discussions and dialogues with other Muslims. And I don't think he has a lot of takers besides apparently a 16-year-old kid. Which is funny. One of my first debates, like I was asking people like debate me, whatever, and it ended up being like a couple, like a 14-year-old and like a 16-year-old kid decided to come in and team up and try to beat me up. Um, but yeah, it's interesting. The young Muslims are interested in debating, but none of the other ones really are. I don't know why. I figured they'd want to come onto a Christian channel and school us, and publicly humiliate us, but who knows? I guess they just haven't done so yet. Or if we want to call into someone else's channel, they have about 13 Muslims on their Zoom call that you can have a discussion with.
Well,
So who knows?
I
Whatever.
sent an email invitation to what's his name, Kenny Boomer.
Oh, Kenny Bomb. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, and he put some conditions like if I have to go with him, he has to see my face, he
Uh-huh.
has to know who I am, what is my background. It's like all I'm asking you, you're the Muslim, I'm not. All I'm asking is to have a discussion. I want you to teach me about your Islam and the Quran.
Hmm.
Why? What is my face important? My name. I gave him a name. That's my name. And I mean, he gave me the runaround. Then, if you're familiar with this person, Alauddin,
Yeah, I know him. Yeah.
whom I call him the Filipino dancer, he sent him a comment that this guy is always a drunk. He doesn't know what he talks about. He gets bounced and dotted in the Christian rooms on the program we go on, Pal
Hmm.
Talk. In other words, bunch of lies. And he relied on them and he goes, well, based upon him, I'm not going to have a discussion with you. You're only using that for an excuse to run because you don't know what your Quran says.
Right.
And now you know that I speak Arabic. That put you in the, like in the corner.
Yeah,
But it is what it
that
is.
definitely gives you a big advantage if you speak Arabic and they don't, right?
Look at Islam Defender. Ayub, no one wants to talk to you. Well, Islam Defender, you know why? Because no one can actually answer questions. The first one is you. My first question with you was, convince me, show me where is the angel mentioned in Surah 96, verse 1. And you promised to do your research and come back and give me an answer. I'm still waiting for the answer, almost a year.
Good point. And if you and Yaya, I think I've got good relationships with both of you. Yaya, if you're ever interested, and if you sir are interested as well in having a debate um, on my channel, I'd be happy to host it. I'm obviously pretty mild mannered and fair. I hope everybody sees that. So if you guys do want to have a discussion on that particular topic, you know who to reach out to. You got my Skype. He's got my Skype. We can make that happen anytime you would like.
What? Not to cut you off on this, and then I'm gonna let you go so you can continue with whoever.
Mhm.
I'm not a debater, okay? Because to me, debate doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
You tell me your opinion, I tell you my opinion. You make statement, I go with questions and answer.
Okay, so you like more of the Q&A
And the only
style?
thing I want is for Muslims to answer questions that I ask about the Quran.
Hmm.
That's all. I mean, give me an answer with fact and evidence. If I tell you where the sun comes from, don't tell me, well, I went to the market to buy bread and I went to the movie theater so I can go watch my daughter
Hmm.
and then the sun comes from the east. What do I need all that for?
Distraction, baby. It's distraction. So
And Islam Defender Yahya is the master of all. You ask him about A, he tells you the whole story, but never gives you the answer to B.
I've been there. I've been there. At least he's a nice guy. He's like friendly and he's at least willing to come on and have a discussion. So
I testify to that.
yeah.
Outside religion, I mean, we talk to him on a personal level.
Hmm.
Me and a couple other guys, we talk to him.
Yeah.
We have laughs with him. He is a great guy. He can be your best friend, but
Hmm.
don't bring religion in it.
No.
He goes off the wall.
Yeah. My theory, and yeah, you're hearing me, so I know you know this, but my theory on him is at heart he's a Christian, but he just can't give up. He just can't give up his Islam because everything he believes is almost like it's almost Christ like, but then he just stays a Muslim. I don't understand it. So right, because if you bring up something about the Quran or a hadith that is most obviously disgusting, he's like, no, it doesn't say that. It says whatever I think it says. You know, he'll deny it, whatever. But yeah, that's my personal theory. So we'll hopefully welcome him into the fold one day. Yahya, we're gonna invite you to Christ, and you're gonna have an experience, and you'll be same side, buddy. That's what I hope for. So.
One thing he needs to do is not to read the Bible and interpret it according to his own interpretation. And then he asks you the question and gives you the answer, and then he wants an answer. So, I mean, you want to learn, you ask, you listen, and you search.
Yep.
When we bring the Quran, Mr. Yahya, we have facts from your Islamic background. There is nothing in our Bible that says we have hadith and we have tafsir and we have this and we have that. We have only the Bible. So if you can read it properly and understand it properly, don't fabricate stories. Stick with your Quran and Islam.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just straightforward. Don't have to go 10,000 steps around it to get back to the point, and then never actually get back to the point. So it's sometimes how it ends up going. But yeah, man, I'm gonna pop off of here. I got a little 3 month old who needs some attention from me. So I'm gonna go hang out with her. But I appreciate you jumping on, man. Guys, go ahead and like and subscribe to his channel here. What do Muslims know? And then also, like I said, why Hoffs and Warsh are not the same. It's Daif Brother. Go ahead and like and subscribe his channel. Also, thank you everybody so much for
Thank you for
watching.
having me.
We're gonna be going. Lloyd and I are gonna be going live on Thursday, just to kind of talk a little bit more about this particular topic. So I kind of used today as a little bit of a feeler, just to kind of see what you guys are thinking out here, and then we'll be able to cover it a little bit more in depth from there. But I look forward to seeing everybody there. God bless everybody, and we'll talk to you later.
God bless you. Be safe.
All right, see you guys.